Imagine that you're hiring a new intern. They work fast, are eager to please, and willing to work 24/7. But they also have a habit of making things up just to make you happy. Do you trust them with your most important work? Or do you micromanage every single output? Welcome back to our special series called Inside Service Design. These are the conversations where we skip the conference polish and get real. It's all about uncovering the lived experiences and on-the-ground experiences from professionals who are in the trenches, shaping services from the inside. Sure, we often hear about the thoughts and ideas from the well-known names in our industry, which is of course fantastic. But I'm just as interested in the messy middle. The stories from in-house professionals who aren't in the spotlights, but are doing the crucial day-to-day work. They are the ones who live in that gap between clean theoretical models and the complexity of an organization. Sharing their stories with you is what this series is all about. This conversation is the next in our deep dives, and today we are joined by Judith Buhmann and Jessica Dugan. Both are experienced professionals working on the inside. Judith specializing in inclusive design within the nonprofit sector, and Jess focusing on internal systems and employee experience in large corporate settings. Judith and Jess are also members of the Circle community, where they recently hosted group discussions on the intersection between humanity and tech. In the episode, you'll hear us reference the Circle a few times, and if you are not familiar with it, it's good to know that the Circle is our community for in-house service design leaders and those who are on that path. I started the community because driving change inside an organization is an endurance race, and many professionals are running that race all by themselves. So, with the Circle, we want to provide these professionals with their own pit crew, a team of trusted peers who give support, provide a sense check, and share practical advice. If you are curious, you can learn more about the community over at servicedesignshow.com/circle, and as always, the link is also in the show notes. So in this episode, we unpack the AI dilemma from two different angles. Jess shares a practical framework for bringing your own agent, which means treating AI like your junior associate to handle the grunt work, while Judith challenges us to think about trust versus truth and the dangers of over-eager AI cheerleaders. And of course, as in every episode, we bust some myths about in-house service design. So I hope you are ready for some honest stories and practical wisdom that you will not find in the textbooks. I am your host, Mark Fontijn, and you are listening to the Service Design Show. Welcome to the show, Jess and Judith.
Thanks, Mark.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to have you on. I'm really excited to explore the world of in-house service design and AI, because that's going to be the key topic of the dinner table conversations that we'll get to in a second. But as we always do in this series, the tradition has become to sort of unravel your journeys into our lovely practice. And Jess, today I would like to start with you. We are all listening and very curious. Could you share a little bit about how you ended up in the role that you currently have? What's your background? How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. So when I made the decision to go back to grad school, I was actually really interested in museum exhibition design, and thinking through wayfinding and how do people flow through a physical space and how does information move with them and how do you tell stories. And I learned that there wasn't really a practicum for that at the school I was at, but I discovered that service design was similar in many ways, maybe in more abstract forms where you're looking at the flow of data and information and bringing people through processes. And in some senses, there's physical spaces and there's lots of digital and ecosystems now that we have to manage ourselves through. And so I started to become really interested in service design and learning just how that practice could be applied, in particular to healthcare. And so I started off doing consulting work for a small service design consulting firm in DC. Got a lot of experience doing healthcare and CPG type of work, lots of service prototyping and business model prototyping, trying to help companies that were product focused make that transitions to revenue from services. And I eventually made the jump to in-house, going in-house for a big healthcare company. And I, from there, have been in-house for the better part of the last 15 years, and have really enjoyed being in corporate design because I feel like there's lots of complexity, especially in the industries that I've been in, which are healthcare and energy and now financial services. And um, a couple years ago, was looking for a new adventure and made the full-time jaunt over to in-house financial service design, which has been an adventure and a learning, similar in many ways, but have has its own nuances, right?
Interesting. I don't know if you've seen our previous episode, but if I recall correctly, Jeff uh, also had well, he wasn't in museum, I think, but exhibition design. That seems to be
Mhm.
a path into service design. Judith, do you also have a museum slash exhibition design background, or did you take a different path into service design?
So my path is quite different. I guess mine sort of mirrors many other people's experiences in that I guess I've been doing it for a very long time, but didn't realize that it was official until fairly recently. So yeah, I guess I started way back in that I've done countless service oriented jobs in the past. In some cases, I was delivering very badly designed services that made rich people or rich stakeholders richer, at the expense of those of us who just needed a job to pay our bills. But on the other hand, I've been really fortunate to have jobs where I've delivered services that were crucial in helping people or helping to make people's lives better. Yeah, I've worked across many industries. I have done freelance work, I have done agency work, and now I am doing in house work. And yeah, I specialize in inclusive service design. So yeah, inclusivity is absolutely at the core of my own service design practice. And I think my lived experience has obviously shaped my approach to design. And I grew up in South Africa, so I witnessed the impact of both radical inclusion and radical exclusion firsthand. Um, yeah, so I guess back in the 80s and 90s, I didn't quite understand the rules that were in place at the time. And I was questioning why these things existed because they didn't make sense. And then when they were abolished, why they were there in the first place. And I think coming to the UK has been interesting in that design is a thing you can do as a career in the UK that I didn't realize you could do back home. But inclusion and curiosity about why some things and people are included and others aren't is absolutely at the core of what I do. And yeah, what I specialize in is bringing in marginalized voices into the work that I do, which is at the company that I'm at the moment. It's really, really important that I'm able to do that. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's me.
Hmm. Different, definitely a different path. So the doing in-house service design is often a little bit mysterious because almost nobody gets the question to actually design a service, and we are very much interested in this podcast series to what it is that you actually do working in-house. So Judith, sort of to continue with your story, inclusivity is important, but like what do you do as an in-house service designer? Could you share some of the projects that you're working on without sharing anything that might get you fired?
Yes. So the project that I'm currently on is one of the most rewarding, but also one of the most challenging projects I have ever worked on. So I'm looking at how to improve the overall experience for our WAV customers on the scheme. So a WAV is a wheelchair accessible vehicle that has been specially designed or converted so a wheelchair user can travel safely and comfortably while remaining in their wheelchair or transferring to a seat and doing it that way. They typically feature ramps, lifts, tie downs, lowered floors, adapted seating layouts. Yeah, they're quite complex machines. So we have the vehicles that our customers are using, and we have the service that underpins everything that we do. Yeah, I've had the privilege of spending the past few months talking to everybody who makes the scheme run and work, but also to our customers, which, yeah, it's just been fascinating just to hear their stories and to bring their voices into the room. Sometimes literally, sometimes more as a kind of insights or observations that they've shared with me. Um, but yeah, I think one of the most challenging things about this project is that it's run in a really hostile political climate at the moment. So, I mean, yeah, worldwide there are issues going on, but in the UK, the autumn budget was last week, so we're working towards figuring out what we're going to do once the budget announcement has been made. So there was a lot of disinformation about the scheme, a lot of disinformation about our customers. So working on something that was being so critically looked at by so many people is quite challenging, but we've got through it, and we're cracking on with it, and I'm really excited about the work that we're about to do.
Nice. Yeah, I see the your lights. No, your lights light up. No, your eyes light up. That's when you talk about this. Yeah, it sounds. It does sound like a quote unquote typical service design challenge to work on. So
Yeah.
nice. Jess, do you also have classical service design challenges you're working on, or are there types of challenges that make it to your desk on a different scale level?
Yeah, I think I do a lot of internal service design for our employees. And so right now, I'm working on a few different projects, and most of them look at improving the processes and the systems that our employees use to be able to deliver that customer service. And so a lot of the work that I do is understanding what are those current processes, what, do they have that is working well, where are the gaps in those processes, and then how do we go about getting the buy-in first and understanding what are the solutions or the different types of solutions that we can implement to fix those types of things. And so I think very classical, design types of challenges that we're looking at, with a bit of a twist on the fact that we're designing for the customer two levels down. um,
Well, yeah, two levels down. But I do feel that the employee is also a very important stakeholder in this whole
oh
service
yeah.
design thing, which is often overlooked, but nowadays, fortunately, getting more and more involved. Yeah. Cool. Okay. I think you both had some experience working both in-house and sort of on the consulting side. Jess, if you had to pick out one pro of being on the inside, what would you say?
Yeah, I think, and I think this is a typical answer, but I'll say it anyway. I think one of the things is the depth that you can go into the work, and the consistency that you can bring from project to project. When you are working as a consultant, you come in for, at the least amount of time, 12 weeks maybe, and at the most amount of time, maybe for a year. But when you're in-house, you have the benefit of being in the trenches with people every day. You get to learn those contacts, you get to build relationships, and you start to understand really what are the different forces at play that enable us to deliver or not deliver these different services that we're looking to push through. So having that direct access, having the ability to dig in deep and to bring that context from project to project, I think is one of the big benefits.
This is what we hear often. I'm curious, Judith, do you have anything to add? Because the sort of prerequisite in order to do this type of work is, I think, that you need a lot of patience. So that is maybe I don't know if it's a con, but it's a condition. Anything to add about the pros of working in-house?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jess. I think being able to work on something and really understand in depth what you're working on, who you're working with, and why you're doing the work. I think in my case, that depth of knowledge means I can actually do my job properly. I don't know how somebody would be able to come in at a very kind of surface level to try and challenge the issues that my colleagues and I are dealing with. But there is also that learning that you can take from a project and apply it to a different project that you're working on within the same organization, even though the two pieces of work are different. But for me, again, it really depends where you're working, but I get to see firsthand the impact that the work that I do has on the customers that we serve. And that's a positive, and our colleagues, positive and negative, because some of the work that I do, people get very excited about what the future could look like because it's may look quite utopian, but I've been in workshops where people have come to talk to me and say, that's amazing, I'm so excited. And someone else has said, I don't know if I have a place in this future that you've just mapped out for us. What am I going to do? So it is more intense being in-house than it is being a consultant who can come in, do a bit of a job, hand something over, and then leave.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I guess that's a story that we often sort of experience. So thank you for validating that. Now, you are both members of our Circle community. Every month we host our dinner table session and we get together with, I sort of say, extended family size group, not bigger, to explore topics that sort of help you to build your toolkit, help you to become more resilient, help you to prepare for the future. The last 3 months, we are exploring humanity and tech as a season. And within that season, you both hosted a session that was related to AI. There we go. And I would love to explore with you together what the sessions were about and what of the key highlights were for you. Let's start with you, Judith. What was the title of the session and what made you decide that that was an interesting thing to put on the plates of your fellow Circle members?
Yeah, so the topic that I chose was putting AI tool, or the tools that we use, do we trust them? So it was a conversation about, not about the tools themselves. We all know which AI tools exist. We all use very similar tools, but how much do we trust those tools? And if the trust isn't there, what is the compromise? Which means that we're happy to use those tools in certain situations. So yeah, the session that I ran was very much around trust and the tools that we're using.
We'll dig deeper into that in a second. Jess, you approach it from a slightly different perspective, but I think very adjacent. Could you share a little bit about your session?
Sure. So the title of my session was Bring Your Own Agent, with the idea that we as service designers can create our own agents and our own knowledge bases to help us within our tasks as service designers or to help our customers and stakeholders within our organizations. And it was a hands-on workshop that enabled the participants to think through what type of agent would they want to build, how would they build it, what's the type of information and task they would want the agent to do, and then ultimately start to think through how they might deploy this, how they might test it, how do you experiment with an agent and keep it up to date.
And for I know that at the start of your session, we actually had established a baseline of definitions. So for anyone who's listening and confused about agents, what is your take on what an agent is?
Yeah, so an agent is, I would say, an autonomous software program that does a very specific action, that it's been programmed to do on your behest, or on behest of the user that you're designing it for. And so an agent essentially executes, a lot of the times, very specific tasks, but sometimes more broad actions, uh, without needing a lot of prompting and feedback throughout the process. And a knowledge base, I would say, is the brain of that agent, is the information that you collect so that that agent can run those specific tasks or those specific activities that you're asking it to do. And so we're building repositories of information that it can draw upon and that it can utilize to be able to perform those functions.
In my words, if I would humanize this, the knowledge base would, for instance, would be a set of transcripts of interviews that you've done with stakeholders, and your agent would be an intern who you have given a very specific task description on how to analyze those scripts and get out the patterns. Like, there would be a way
Yes.
for me to humanize. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. And I love that analogy of the intern, or sometimes I say junior associate, because it's work that needs to be done. But I don't always have the time or the appetite to do some of those things. So it's allowing the agent to take some of that work that we might categorize as grunt work or difficult work off of your hands, maybe like you would give to an intern. Still very important work and very meaningful work. But then frees us up to do the tasks that we want to do that are more meaningful to our day-to-day work.
And the interesting part of your session was that we actually used our design process to sort of figure out like the persona of this agent and the workflow. We'll get back to that in a second, but I want to now go back to Judith, because your topic was trust. How do we trust this intern? How do we trust this junior associate, this tool that we have built ourselves? What can we learn from your session about that?
I don't think we can fully trust any AI. It's just, yeah. None of us came to the session as people who are not willing to engage or fully distrust the AI to the degree that we're not willing to give it a go. We were all very cautiously curious about what these tools meant for us and how we could make them work for us, rather than allow them to dictate how we are going to do our jobs going forward. So I think, yeah, creating your own agent is an interesting one. I agree. I think this is probably how we'll be working in the future, rather than switching between all of these different tools to try to get a job done, to create your own personal repository of whatever those AI tools are that are tailored to your requirements at any given time. I think another thing that we talked about in my session was that trust is not a thing you give to AI immediately. It's the opposite. As with anything, you build that trust up over time. And it's a little bit trial and error at the moment, because we're all very well informed about what's going on in the background. And as designers, we're acutely aware that it's quite an exploitative new technology that is benefiting off of especially design. There is no credit for the work that a lot of us have done, although it's being used to train these incredible machines that are, all of us are in fear are going to take our jobs. But I think, yeah, the idea that we can craft an AI to become an assistant, specifically for the jobs that we're doing, is really interesting. But I don't think any of us fully trusted AI to take a job we'd given it and kind of go off and do it. We were all very much overseeing the outcome, tweaking things, making sure that it was accurate. Yeah, the trust in the accuracy was probably the highest concern for most of us. We didn't trust that what it spat out at the other end was a thing we could just kind of pass off as our own.
If we continue on our intern or junior associate analogy, um, how did you notice any differences? Because I guess you wouldn't trust the output of a junior associate point blank either, right? So, what did you find around that, Judith?
I think, again, as Jess said, it's valuable work that we're handing off to this new assistant, but it's very limited. I think we used the word intern in the session. We kind of started off with trying to describe how we view AI if they were a colleague, and we had various comparisons to the intern or the over-eager assistant who doesn't quite understand their own limitations, or the creative storyteller who just embellishes things without understanding that the implication of that is that perhaps they undermine the trustworthiness or believability of whatever it's creating. So yeah, I think it's a really difficult one. They are very, very helpful, but they are very hard to manage.
Well, I maybe there is a thing around expectations and the expectations that we have or have been set around what these tools can currently produce without any assistance, and that those expectations might need to be adjusted, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Jess, so, okay. We have this junior associate that we still cannot fully trust or let go on its own. But you had an interesting step-by-step process that would at least help us to figure out, okay, who does this assistant, this associate need to be? Can you walk us through the key steps of the process?
Yeah, I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me, so I'm going to do the best I can from my memory here.
Just wing it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's akin to the design process that we're all used to, in that it starts from a user-centered perspective. Who are we designing this for? What are the types of things it needs to do? And so the first step is really defining the problem that the agent is going to solve. And if you think about problem framing that we do in our everyday work, what's the right level for this agent to be able to jump in and start solving this problem? If you go too broad and say you're going to do everything that has to do with service design, then you might not get the type of work that you can trust, because it's using all of these these different sources that are in there. If you do too narrow, then you have a very specific bot, which is great. Sometimes when you're looking at systems of agents that are coming together, you want a very narrow scope. But we kind of looked at what's the right scope or the right problem to have this agent solve. And the next one was thinking through who are the users, and what is the things that we're looking for it to help us with. So what are the actions? What are the types of activities that we want this agent to do to help solve this problem? So here's the problem and here's the approach that we're looking at. So kind of scoping out what's happening there. And also thinking through what is this agent like? What's its personality? What's the tone that we're asking it for? Is there a certain tone if we're designing for, say, children? You want to have a different tone than you would have for adults. And so defining what that feels like and how it goes about responding to those types of things. Then we take a look at how we can begin to give it knowledge. So what's the type of information it has to draw upon in this knowledge base? Are there types of information, whether those are transcripts or books or websites, and then what's the actual content within those types of information that we want to serve it with. So we're at this point not necessarily building the agent itself, but we're building the framework for how the agent will operate. And then we want to think about, after we build the knowledge base, what are the ways that we would test this? How do we show that it's doing its job? How do we show that we're getting the types of responses? And then how do we change or mitigate those types of things? What are the ways that you'll go in and start to train it more? How would you give it more information? And I think those are the main steps that we're taking a look at, that are very similar, I think, to the design process that we go through on our own end.
Interesting. And I can imagine that for someone who's listening right now and hasn't yet played around with agents, the thing that you're describing, sure, I get that we sort of need an identity, a tone of voice, a description, a knowledge base, but then like, how do I actually access this? Like, how does this manifest? So could you give an example of that?
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate at my organization that we have a lot of AI and internal tools within our own LLM. And so we've been given the opportunity to design assistants and to design knowledge bases that are out there. And I think it starts as simple as, I have an existing knowledge base, and I'm going to take the information that I just developed, the tone of voice and the tasks that I want it to do, and just plop it in as a prompt into any LLM that you have. And when you have those instances of the different conversations, it'll just begin to use that information you gave it. You can still feed things in there. So you have a very small kind of microcosm of your own agent within a chat, within a window that's happening there. Or you can go more broadly and develop your own knowledge base using something like Gemini, or like Chat GPT, where you can manage it on its own separately. And you can also then create that persona itself that it can operate in the background. You can
Hmm.
provide some instructions that are out there. And so I think there's complex ways that if you really get into this, and you want to be able to maintain this and train it and keep it going and share it with others, you want to get into on the far end. But there's really easy ways that you can start to do this as well, just by popping in some context and prompts.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to translate it to sort of my context. The
Sure.
the simplest way, probably how I would build this, is if I have access to Google Gemini, then I can create a sort of, it's called a system prompt, or basically the agent instructions. And then I can maybe add 5 YouTube videos that are relevant to the domain that I'm interested in. I don't know, plumbing or something like that. How to become a plumber 101. And then the way I actually interact with this agent just becomes a chat interface. You just talk to them as with any other LLM, but now it knows the 5 YouTube videos, and it knows how to sort of respond to which tone and the things that I'm looking for. This would be the simplest way. I would know how to actually build this. And like you said, from here on out, you can start making things more and more complex, right? Is that a correct
Yes.
assumption?
Yep. That sounds like a good approach to me.
Yeah, that's where I would start. Okay, so it's not
Yep.
hard to build your own agents, or at least to get started with it. So that's anyone who's listening can do that. Okay, thanks, Jess. Judith, now back over to you. Trust, touchy subject, difficult, important. What were some of the key takeaways that you heard from the other members?
Ooh, I think one thing that we all agreed on was that we were kind of, design in general, we were the first wave that were hit by AI. So we were flawed. We felt the impact immediately. We kind of had to get up, dust ourselves off, and figure out what had happened. I mean, we're still very much in that kind of space, but we are far enough along now that we know what's happened. We can take a step back and look at this technology in a more critical way. And I think, yeah, we're reluctant to embrace it. And I don't know how many of us have as much freedom and access within our own organizations to play around with AI to the degree where we can be creating agents that can help us with our jobs in the way that you've described, Jess. But I think in our own limited way, we are keen to experiment, but are we are very mindful that the data that we're feeding into whatever AI it is that we have access to or that we've been allowed to use, it needs to respect privacy, GDPR within Europe. There's a lot of regulation around how we're allowed to use AI, but yeah, I mean, we are keen, but we are cautious, and we are approaching this in a very human way, in that we don't want the humanity of our participants, for example. If we're feeding transcripts into an AI, how do we know for sure that what comes out the other end is accurate? And this is really important for my role and the kind of work that I do. A lot of how we get buy-in is by giving quotes from our customers and our colleagues and our partners. And yeah, AI is notorious for making stuff up to try to bolster an argument that you're trying to make. It is definitely your cheerleader and wants you to succeed, but you will fail. You will fail if you're giving a verbatim that it has been completely made up.
Yeah.
Or a customer has been quoted as saying something. Again, I'm very fortunate in that we have direct access to our customers pretty much 24/7. We can go and talk to them. But yeah, when you're working with vulnerable people, that is just even more important, that what you are quoting, what you are feeding in is accurate. And I don't think it's quite there yet for me. But yeah, hopefully it will get to that point. But for now, we are all very cautious.
Well, it's a good reminder that we can't get lazy, right? And that's something that's lurking around the corner. That oh, okay, here's the thing that will get rid of the hard work, the tedious work, and then I can go off have a cocktail. But it's not like we shouldn't get lazy just yet.
One of the
I
things,
would say it's. Oh, sorry, you go, Jess.
No, I was just going to say one of the things you're reminding me of, Judith, is I heard a really great talk by Ovetta Sampson, and she one of the things that I recall from her chat was she said we no longer need to design for trust, we need to design for truth. And so when you think about transparency, how do I build that transparency into experiences so that people feel like they understand where this information is coming from, that it's not hallucinated, that it's something that I can any person can understand how these were created and what are the systems and the information and the processes that pull these together. And I think that's going to be really important when we're designing agents, that we're, constantly checking in and thinking through, where is this coming from? How is this output being presented? What's the type of information that we're giving that allows people to know that this is a true statement and not something that's made up? And also something that we need to think about as consumers. What are the types of things I should be asking? And so it can be as simple as asking after a result comes through, saying, tell me where you got this from, or give me the timestamp of the transcript that this quote is from. So because it's in this knowledge base and because it has all this information it's pulling from, this agent should be able to prove to you, to show you the truth of where these things are coming from. And so I just thought Ovetta had a great point there to think about that transparency in the age of AI, that we're all about trust, but we also need to think about truth.
That's a good point. We had an opportunity to see Ovetta in the Beyond the Map conference in Barcelona, and Who knows? Maybe she's going to be on the service design show one day as well. Hint, hint, and not judge. Yes, I want to end this topic with you. And that is also like you had, I don't know, 10, 15 people go through this exercise of designing their own agent in like a pressure cooker environment. What were some of the key questions, insights, highlights that emerged for you?
I think for me, I was really fascinated by the variety of different agents that individuals were creating. We had one, for example, a participant was looking at how did he assist his patients and his patients' families in finding funding sources to get them to the treatment that they needed. So weeding through all of the documentation and all of the possible grants that were out there that could provide services to somebody who was helping to design an agent for their product team that I need a some kind of system that allows my product team to better scope design projects so that they can bring me in earlier in the process. And so I really liked that wide range of different types of um, agents and activities that were coming up. I thought that was really cool to hear people talk through it. And I think another thing that came through was we had a lot of backpedaling sometimes where people would go in and they would design something, they'd get to step 3 and they would say, I don't know how I would do this. I don't know how I would go about training this, or perhaps that a conversational agent isn't the best way to solve this problem. It sounds like it's good in theory, but it actually needs more nuance from a
Mm.
human. And so thinking about where you needed human in the loop, I think was something else that was revealing to me as people were going through their own build process.
I recognize that from the session as well. And one of the things that, next to what you just said, stood out for me is that this was almost like a perfect Trojan horse to work on things in the organization that should be in place but aren't already. So, for instance, you mentioned the knowledge base a few times. And then when you start off, like, wouldn't it be great if we had an agent do XYZ? And then everybody goes like, yeah, that would be amazing, would save so much time. And then you go back, okay, then we need this information to be in place and be sanitized and validated. And everybody goes like, hold on. Okay, that's something that we actually need to work on. So I found that, like, just in itself a very valuable exercise to sort of get the what is it, the base baseline in place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have one more month to go in our humanity and tech season, and then it's going to be 2026, and we'll explore 4 different seasons. But AI is a key topic for sure. Moving on to our final section of our Inside Service Design episode format, and that is to chat a little bit about, I don't know, myths, best practices, key learnings about doing in-house service design. Judith, I'm going to start this one with you. Looking from the inside out, what do you feel are some... what is a misconception about doing in-house service design?
Perhaps that when you get in-house, well, it's not a myth, but you probably are going to be a team of 1 or 2, unless you're really lucky and you end up in a team where there are hundreds of designers. But yeah, the myth is that you kind of get into a place and that's where your development as a designer stops. So I have worked at an agency during the halcyon days of the agency world, where we were the most important people in the room and we were the smartest and most talented designers in the room. In-house is not like that at all. But I think both of these environments are stifling in their own way. And I think if you're in an environment that's where you're surrounded by designers, you talk about design all the time, you do events about design, you develop in a very specific way. You don't you don't really understand how a business works, or people who are not designers, it's very difficult in that sort of an environment to be able to communicate effectively what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and the problems that you're trying to solve. That may be symptomatic of the fact that perhaps sometimes it's not very clear what those things are when you go in as an agency person or a consultant. But I think when you go in-house, those skills are honed to perfection. Your design skills are put through their paces because you have to adapt really, really quickly. You have to unlearn those designy ways of doing things, because you're not going to explain to anybody what you do and why what you do is important if you can't speak the same language as the people you're working with. So when you go into a corporate environment as an in-house designer, you have to learn a whole new language, and it's all about corporate speak and a lot of military kind of metaphors to get the job done and boots on the ground, which is quite different to how it is in an agency. But yeah, I think the myth is that perhaps um, your design sensibilities become dull, but that's not the case at all. I think you sharpen those skills because you are forced to defend why you are doing something over and over and over.
Interesting. Interesting take. Do you recognize this, Jess? And I'm also curious, like, what is something that you learned the hard way, maybe next to what Judith just already mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So Judith, I think that that's very true. And I think often there can be some criticism of in-house designers as taking the easy way, and you have so much more time to do your projects, and you're able to be a little bit more relaxed in that environment. I don't think that's true at all. I think for all the reasons you said, that design in any organization is always fighting, as we know, to show its value and its impact. And so you have to make sure that every interaction and every project is on point and resonates and has the ability to have others pick it up. Change management so important in in-house service design, because if you're not planning for the buy-in and the uptake of all those different levels within the organization, it's just not going to work. So that very much resonates with me. When you initially asked that question, Mark, the thing that came to mind is maybe a con, maybe something that's a negative in there, is that I think there's, and maybe this is true in every service design environment, but I feel it more so in-house, is that you're going to come in and you're going to be able to design this grand end-to-end vision and be able to implement it. And I'm going to have this service that starts from the very beginning and it's going to go all the way through, and I'm going to be able to shepherd it through this process, and it's going to be great. And I think what happens is it tends to be a lot more piecemeal when it comes to the work. And it tends to be more, I've noticed, less of designing brand new services that I'm going to serve up to the customers or to the employees, and more about going in and refining the existing services and
Mm.
processes. And so it ends up um, using co-creation and ideation in a different way than I think you learn in an academic setting,
Mm.
or you hear about when you think about just the theory and practice of service design. It's really about finding ways to incorporate service design thinking into these environments, in these projects, than it is an end-to-end grandiose type of vision that you get to execute.
Yeah, that resonates with a story that we had recently on the show as well. I think with Ron Bronson, where he said service design is repair, which is an interesting take that we don't hear that often, but I do think that that is the reality. Yeah. Okay, let's also try to look at this from a positive lens, Judith. What's an achievement, accomplishment that you're proud of? And the reason I'm asking this is that almost in every episode that we do here is like recognizing success when you're working in-house can be really tough, because things can take a long time, and it's really hard to claim that it's sort of quote unquote your victory. So I don't know, what are things that you're proud of? Like, how do you recognize success? Any thoughts around that?
I work at a non-profit, so success for the business is measured slightly differently than a profit-making organization. So I guess if you're looking at success at a kind of high level, it is slightly different depending on where you are.
But what is it for you? Yeah.
Yeah, on an individual level, I think for me, the fact that something that I managed to do recently that I've not been able to do until now is that I've managed to bring customers into the same room as the people who are asking me to do this work because they want to improve the customer experience. And you can challenge people around what they mean when they say, I want you to improve the customer experience. You can do a bunch of research, do a bunch of mapping, but the only way to actually get somebody to listen is when you put these two people in a room. And it was amazing. It was very senior leaders within my organization who genuinely care about the customer, but hadn't really had the opportunity to talk to any of them in person. So I put them in a room and the senior person had to listen. And the only question they could ask was for clarification if they didn't quite understand what the customer was telling them. And even now, months down the line, they still reference those conversations. And I've managed to bring in, on a small scale, an ethos of collaboration and co-creation, which actually means bringing a human being into the room. It's not a video, it's not a recorded phone call, it's another person in the room who is genuinely pushing back on the ideas that we're having. So that to me is success.
That's a huge win. Yeah.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
inclusion is what I'm meant to be doing, this is a good one.
And you mentioned that, I don't know, you didn't use the word small, but a change like this, change in the ethos, change in the culture, like that's amazing. That's awesome, right? So congrats on that.
Thanks.
Jess, what does success look for you?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the time, success is the ability to provide clarity to the teams that I'm working with. And I think that often I'll come into a space and as it is in a lot of large organizations, I'll come into a space and there'll be several teams working on the same thing. There might be duplicative work. There might be ways that they think they're communicating, but they're not. And for me to come in and start to kind of unravel that hairball and to begin to provide clarity to the team on what's working, what's not working, and have them start to create what I want to say, have them start to create consensus around a certain approach, I think is so important and something that service design does. When I first joined my job that I have now about a year ago, I went into this big initiative that we were looking to do around an internal process for better targeting customers. And there were so many steps and processes that they were going through in this interim vision that they created in this service. I think I mapped out 168 steps that were in there. And when I laid it all out and started to show them, here's all of the different people that are involved, here's where we're going around in circles in this particular service and process that's happening. And here's some ways that we can think about reducing this and starting to provide a better system for our employees to work in. It was just it was a big reaction. I printed out my service blueprint and it was 12 feet long on a wall, and I think Judith talked a lot about bringing people and creating that empathy and having them see things for themselves. I think anytime you have an artifact that large, people can just immerse themselves in it and really start to understand the complexity. And so for me, clarity and consensus and agreement is something that I think shows success in service design, because it gets that alignment that allows us to march forward and then develop these better experiences in the long run.
I'm curious, listening to your examples, like Judith's example. There is something very tangible you can point to that months later they are still referencing or inviting people in. In your example, Jess, like how do you measure
Yeah.
the fact that there is consensus or that sense making has worked? Like, what do you grasp onto to figure out that this is working?
Yeah, good question. So I think one of the markers was that immediately after we did this offsite with a giant service blueprint, people were asking to get their hands on it. I did lots and lots of repeat sessions explaining what these things were, going over some of the different pain points that were in there. And then it continued to be utilized. We also had an effort to start to think about how we would update this. What does it look like as we're building the airplane as we're flying it, what needs to change, and how do we begin to simplify these types of things? And so I think the ongoing conversation and my inclusion in these activities was a really positive signal that we were starting to make some common ground and that these were useful things for myself and for the team to have participated in.
Yeah, that is a really strong market that we've heard more often here on these episodes where, like, if you get repeat business, if people keep
Yes.
coming back to you, then apparently you're doing something right. So that is like,
Yeah.
if the phone isn't ringing on your service design department, then you need to switch things up. Okay. Now I want to do one last thing with both of you. I'm here asking the questions, but that is not very user-centered. You are the in-house service design professional, so it would make a lot more sense that you are actually asking the questions, and I'm going to give you the opportunity. So there are thousands of people listening to our conversation today. Judith, if you could ask one of these other in-house service design professionals a question, what would you be curious about? What would you like to know from them? And Jess, I'll also ask this question to you.
Oh, that's a hard one. Um, what specifically are you asking?
I'm asking if you'd be in my spot and you'd be the host of a podcast interviewing in-house service designers, what would you ask them? What would you be curious about?
As we're on the topic of AI, I think what I'm quite interested to know at the moment is what role does AI play? Like the agents that Jess has described, how are people approaching AI as participants in a system, as the the actors that will be influencing our decision making? How are people approaching this, and how are they choosing the tools, the agents, whatever it is, that they trust enough to be reliable narrators in the systems that we are now designing for? I think we're in a unique position in that we're having to consider AI as an equal almost, whereas others are perhaps using these as assistants and tools to get a job done. But if people think that AI can do design, then we need to seriously consider how are we approaching this in a realistic and measured way.
Good question. Let's see if any comments come up. What about you? Yes. What would be your question?
Yeah, I think something that I'm always curious about when talking to other service designers is trying to understand the best practices that they have for, I guess, enabling the longevity of the use of their services. So I think that one of the things that I've heard a lot of designers say is that they often try to not call themselves designers within organizations. They sort of distance themselves from the lingo and from the practice, and not different from what Judith was talking about earlier. But what are some of those sustainable strategies that we have to make ourselves indispensable? Outside of just the mindset and the thinking and the tools that we have, how are we surviving and being scrappy? How is it that we can look at, and perhaps AI is part of that equation now? How do we begin to find ways to ensure that we are always an integral part of the conversation when it comes to designing new products and services and organizations?
That is a fascinating question. And not so long ago, we actually had a circle dinner table session that was specifically about how do we become indispensable. So awesome. Yes, I love it. Yes, Judith, thanks for coming on, sharing your stories, giving a little bit of insight of what it is to actually do in-house service design and not just looking at the polished case studies at conferences or reading the books. So very helpful to actually have stories from people who are on the ground. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank
Lots
you.
of fun.
Well, I hope you're walking away with some fresh perspectives on how we interact with our digital colleagues. I'll definitely be thinking about Jeff's approach to building agents as junior associates. And of course, Judith's critical reminder that we don't just need to design for trust, but we need to design for truth. I also love the reminder that success in-house doesn't always look like a shiny product or service launch. Sometimes, as Jess showed us, it's about untangling a hairball of 168 process steps. And sometimes, as Judith shared, the biggest win is simply getting a senior leader to sit in a room and listen to real customers. In our conversation, Judith asked an important question that I want to pass on to you. How are you approaching AI as a participant in your system? Do you see it as just a tool or as an actor that influences decision making? I would love to hear your take on that. Please leave a comment on this episode on Spotify or YouTube. And as we talked about, there's no denying that driving this kind of change in-house is an endurance race. If you are feeling that you're running this race all by yourself and could use your very own pit crew, well, that's exactly why we started the Circle community. In the Circle, you'll find that group of smart, generous, and experienced professionals like Judith and Jess. The Circle is the place to get that honest sense check, share practical advice, and find the support you need to keep going. To learn more about the Circle and how you can join us, head over to servicedesignshow.com/circle. And of course, you'll find the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Service Design Show. My name is Mark Fontijn. Take care and see you soon.